Hey everybody, how you doing? My name is Mac. I'm a sommelier here in Philadelphia, and tonight I wanted to talk a little bit about terroir. So the last couple of episodes that I did, I talked about a specific wine. This time I want to talk about just sort of a concept in winemaking or in the wine world. So terroir is this idea that a given grape is going to grow better in some places than in others, right? It comes out of this idea in France where certain grapes are only allowed to be grown in the areas where they were destined to be amazing things. So Côte de Beaune, you see a lot of white wines. Côte de Nuit, you see a lot of red wines. And it's because there's something about the weather, something about the soil, something about the temperature and the way they make wine there that really makes these wines sing when they're from these places. But it's important to note that grapes aren't cows, right? Like, it's not that, there's something special necessarily about that place. It's that it's the right chemical make in the soil. It's the right climate. It's the right, those sorts of things. And the world's in a weird spot right now where, because of climate change, a lot of these things are starting to shift around, right? We're seeing, areas like Languedoc in the last year had a much hotter temperature than normal. And so because of that, they had a lot of damage in their vineyards. And other areas of the world, forest fires in Australia, a lot of wines in there have like an ashtray sort of component to it. And it was just because of the smoke that was in the air when they made these things. And so while there is some truth to it, it doesn't mean that grapes can't be planted in other places or that new grapes can't come in and start to fill in the gaps. So to illustrate that, I want to talk about this Spadolone Primitivo Reserva I had the other day. Italian wine. But the Primitivo grape is interesting because as a grape, it's basically just Zinfandel, same stuff. But because it's made in Italy a certain way, it's got these different names. And what's interesting is, two things about this wine. First off, it's a great example of the way they make wine mattering for this terroir thing. In other words, the traditions that they have chemically affect what happens in the bottle almost as much as what's in the soil. So these guys, Fadalone, they actually age this wine while playing classical music to it. Now, grapes don't have ears, right? There's no way that playing the music matters, right? Well, it actually ends up, there's some scientific evidence that suggests that maybe it does. In this particular case, Primitiva is generally done with Slavonic oak, Slovenian oak. In Slovenian oak, unlike French and American oak, which is what you see in a lot of other places, it has a very tight grain to it. They want to use that because you don't want the oak flavors to completely overpower the Primitiva grape, because Primitiva is Zinfandel. It'll soak up a lot of those oak flavors very quickly. And they're trying to make an old world style wine. They don't want those big oak flavors coming from a wine from Italy. You see that more in like California. But they do want more oak than what they would get out of this usual 6 months that they would age this thing in Slovenian oak. And so what they do is they go ahead and play music at this thing. And it turns out the vibration from the music causes the wine to soak a little bit more into the oak, and it gives them the right blend, right? Now, whether they picked up on that early on, I don't know, but they did notice that when they didn't play the music, the wine turned out differently than when they did. Another interesting thing about this wine for me personally is that you find a lot of wines, they'll hit you because your wine, your memory and your olfactory gland, your sense of taste and smell are so closely tied. Every once in a while, you'll taste a wine and it'll hit something from your childhood, or you get this memory that comes out of nowhere. This wine actually does that for me. It has like a salty sort of clay-like minerality to it. And it reminds me of eating Play-Doh when I was a small child, which is kind of a goofy thing to say out loud, but it's still kind of true. And that component of this wine, it's not because of the grape, it's not because of necessarily the soil that they grew it in, it's just the whole vinification process, like what they did to take this grape from the vine, when they picked it, the process of how they go through and have a very natural process, and there's like wild yeast that are involved with this wine from the environment, so it's a very unique sort of a flavor that's going to come out of this. There's something about that place that makes this wine can be what it is, and in me it evokes this memory, right, that comes out of nowhere. Anyway, I'm super interested in this sort of thing. wines from various places being interesting, especially when you start to see crossovers. Over the next few months, I'm going to see if I can source out some wines. I'll post links to the YouTube channel, but we're going to look for Greek grapes grown in Australia. It's real interesting to me. I'm real interested in seeing, some of the non, major French grapes being grown in places like Uruguay, right? And we're going to start talking about some of these grapes and where they come from. But it's important to note that in a lot of cases, it's not just so much like the ground that they're grown in that makes them special, or makes these wines special when they come from a new place. It's that the winemakers are doing something new, doing something interesting, doing something maybe unexpected, like playing classical music at their fermentation vats while the wine's sitting there. Anyway, I hope this might have been inspiring. Hope you have a great weekend, and I hope you drink some wine at some point. And I can't find my off button. There it is. Have a good weekend.